Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Get this draft on the first round going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
What is going on, y'all? Look like we're having some technical difficulties. Just a little bit, but this is the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Austin. I'm super excited to be here, y'all. This is the Patreon segment, and today I'll just be kind of going over, first we're going to do a little Monday Night Football recap, kind of go over everything that was happening from a fantasy perspective over there in that Chargers-Cowboys game. Then afterwards, let's go ahead and look at some waiver targets, guys that we should be looking for, mainly in like these 10 to 12 team fantasy football leagues for week 7. I'm going to give that to y'all early. Super excited to be here as always. Glad that you guys are here checking out the Patreon. I appreciate y'all for that. And then if y'all ever want to drop a tip and support the show, we do accept them right there on that little moving thing in the screen. Streamelements.com/GSMC Sports Network /tip. Let's get right into this Monday Night Football recap, though. It was a pretty decent game. It was a little bit boring, going into the fourth quarter. Then we saw some action, 17 points scored there in that fourth quarter where most of the offense took place. Dak Prescott was at like 160 yards before the fourth quarter took place, and he ended up with like 272. So always a way to backdoor pretty good fantasy performance, just somewhat decent. Nothing too special here from either side, really. Nobody really broke out for a crazy game. But let's start talking about this Cowboys offense. Let's see how many fantasy points Dak Prescott was able to put up this game, and it logged me out. Goodness gracious, man. Can't have nothing. That's okay. We'll just stick to the stats here. And with Dak, pretty decent completion percentage here. He went 21 for 30, 272 yards on the touchdown to Brandon Cooks that he had late in that fourth quarter. He also had a little read option on fourth down where he decided to keep it himself and scramble into the end zone. He looked decently fast there, and we haven't seen Dak really take off and scramble too much this year, so it was good to see. 7 rushes for 40 yards on the touchdown. He actually led his entire team in rushing, which is not good for Tony Pollard owners, but Tony Pollard did do some stuff receiving. That's how he contributed in fantasy today. Looks like he had around 20, maybe 19 fantasy points here because he had the 6 receptions for 80 yards. He had 15 carries for 30 yards, which is kind of surprising against this Chargers defense. They rank, pretty near the bottom of the league in every single statistic for their defense, and they were able to kind of stop a pretty talented personnel group with the Cowboys here. But the Cowboys do come up on top after Herbert throws a pick at the end to seal the game. As far as receiving goes, CeeDee Lamb was the top receiver in the entire game. 7 receptions, 117 yards for him. He had some pretty tough catches, and a lot of people in the media have been talking about CeeDee Lamb as a guy who shouldn't be considered a number 1 wide receiver. I think we all need to throw that out and not listen to anything that people are saying in regards to CeeDee Lamb not being a top receiver. As far as talent goes, he's absolutely a top 10 guy in the league. You can't name 10 wide receivers better than CeeDee Lamb in the league right now, so go ahead and throw that out for sure. He put up a cool, 18, 19 fantasy points in this game, so definitely going to get it done. Wide receiver 1 statistics. He has, been kind of falling off those past 2 weeks with not getting the targets that he deserves, but I'm sure he was in Dak's ear telling him that he needs to be seeing the ball, especially against this Charger squad who just let go of their best corner in J.C. Jackson, and he went back to the Patriots. So very, very interesting situation there for the Chargers defense, and then also CeeDee Lamb and how he's going to progress. I think that he's still going to just be the top guy who's going to receive the most target share for the Cowboys going forward. It doesn't make sense for him not to be that guy. I am surprised to see Tony Pollard getting the same amount of targets as him in this game. And actually, Michael Gallup led the team in targets with 10 targets and only caught 3 of them. I wasn't able to watch the game too much. Really only caught like that fourth quarter, and I'll definitely make sure to check out that game recap. But I don't know how you get 10 targets and only catch 3 balls. That's very disappointing. But stock rising, obviously, if Michael Gallup can find a way to get way more targets in this offense. Brandon Cooks caught the only touchdown, 4 receptions, 36 yards, and a touchdown. We've been waiting for Brandon Cooks to show that he's worth something in fantasy football. I know I have him on my bench. He was a late stash for me. But last time I checked, Brandon Cooks was sitting at like wide receiver 100 currently, and he's been playing all the snaps. So I'm surprised that he hadn't been getting the ball. Dak was talking about his presence in the locker room and how much that he means to these Cowboys. So I do expect him to lighten up a little bit. Jake Ferguson too. I know a lot of you guys are starting Jake Ferguson. 1 reception for 15 yards on 1 target here in this game when he had been getting 7 targets pretty much every game. So slightly concerning, but if the Chargers were going to have any strong point of their defense, I do like their linebackers with like Murray Jr. and guys like that. But Cowboys able to get the win out here. Let's talk about the Chargers offense. Justin Herbert, definitely one of the top QBs. He finished every single week, and including week 6 now, as a top 12 quarterback in every single week. So he is a consistent fantasy player so far through this 2023 season. He went 22 for 37, 227 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Also had a pick right at the end that I was just talking about to seal the game. Stephon Gilmore picked him off. Pretty decent game. Like I said, this is just a guy who's a gunslinger. He threw the ball 37 times, so we love that. We've been seeing him throw it, 30-plus times in a lot of these games. So when the volume's there, he's going to be hitting on a lot of his throws. We saw Austin Eckler back for the first time in a couple weeks. He was going through that high ankle sprain or ankle injury that he had, and he wasn't really able to get going here against this tough front that the Cowboys have. Guys like, obviously, Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, who's one of the best edge rushers in the entire league, and it looks like they were really stopping Austin Eckler up on the ground on his 14 carries, but he still led the team in rushing with only 27 yards. They were doing most of their damage in the passing game. Keenan Allen, just steadily contributing as one of these top fantasy wide receivers right now. I know he's getting older, but I don't think it matters right now. I think this season is Keenan Allen's season, and I don't see him slowing down in any way. It looks like he's only speeding up. This game, 11 targets, which is sweet. 7 receptions, 85 yards, and the touchdown that he had. As far as other receivers, Josh Palmer, 4 catches for 60 yards. He technically is going to fall into that wide receiver 2 spot now that Mike Williams is gone. And then we're looking for Quentin Johnson. A lot of people were talking about, picking up Quentin Johnson just because of the potential that he has. Obviously, first-round pick guy, very big physical wide receiver, and he went 0 receptions for 0 yards on 2 targets today. So it doesn't look like his offensive coordinator is trusting him yet, or Justin Herbert is trusting him yet to be like a constant in this offense yet. Austin Eckler actually got way more work than him out of the backfield. That's what we like about Austin Eckler, obviously, is that he can do it both ways, and he's honestly just as good at both. 4 receptions for 35 yards for Eckler, and then Everett caught a touchdown too. Other than Keenan Allen, that was the only other touchdown pass that the Chargers had. He went 3 receptions for 16 yards. I don't really like Everett as a fantasy play by any means. It doesn't seem like he gets that volume that is needed. He is in an explosive offense, but he's also splitting a bit of time with Donald Parham Jr., 6'8" tight end, who's really a red zone threat. Justin Herbert did look for Parham Jr. one time in the end zone, and it was incomplete. As far as fantasy players go, obviously CeeDee Lamb I really like in this game. Tony Pollard, always going to be a must-start in fantasy football. CeeDee Lamb, Tony Pollard, I wouldn't recommend ever playing Dak, even though he has a decent game here. Justin Herbert, obvious QB1, obvious starter in all places, regardless of the size of your fantasy league. Even if it's 4 teams, you're probably going to want to play Justin Herbert at some point. And then obviously Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, obvious wide receiver and running back ones with an explosive offense. Chargers usually going to put up a lot more than 17 points in a game, and they ran up against a decent defense that was able to shut them down a little bit. And then as far as sleepers go, I do like Josh Palmer at maybe like a deep flex. Seems like he's getting the work and getting the snaps. He had 7 targets here in this game, 4 catches for 60 yards, pretty decent. And, I'm not going to give up on Quentin Johnson yet. Obviously, they spent a first-round pick on this guy, so I think there's potential for him to, be a guy that can, be called upon. And I watched him play in person. I went to the national championship this past year when he was playing for TCU. This is a big physical receiver that definitely has potential to be good in this league. So looking out for Quentin Johnson for sure. Guys, when we come back, let's talk some early Week 7 waiver ads. I got some guys that I like that perform pretty well, so let's talk about them when I come back. How are we doing, ladies and gentlemen? We're continuing the Patreon segment here. If y'all want to support the show, drop a tip. Feel free to do that. streamelements.com/GSMC Sports Network/tip is where you can do that. Let's go ahead and talk about some early waiver targets here in Week 7 that I like. Whether or not they performed well is a bit irrelevant, but just talking about guys that I like on the waiver wire right now. If you're in like a 12-team type league, looking for a guy, maybe one of your guys got injured. If you're like me, Justin Fields just got injured. He's looking doubtful for his Week 7 matchup. Anthony Richardson obviously going to the IR. Those are both of my quarterbacks in one league, so I'm going to need to add somebody. And want to start off talking about the only quarterback on the waiver wire really in a 12-team type fantasy league that I'm looking for. And this is a guy that I started when Justin Herbert just had his bye, and I went with Sam Howell. Man, Sam Howell is kind of a gunslinger, quarterback out of Washington. Obviously, this is his second year in the league. He was just chilling last year, only started one game, and this year has taken over that starting quarterback role and really hasn't been too bad. He's only rostered in 20% of leagues right now, 19.1% on ESPN, and he's quarterback 12. So if you're playing in a 12-team league, this is technically the 12th best guy in the entire league right now as far as fantasy points go. And he just put on another decent performance here in Week 6 versus Atlanta, 14 for 23, 151 passing yards, so not amazing there, but he threw for 3 touchdowns. I had been talking about, when I was previously talking about Sam Howell, is his like sneaky speed and his sneaky athleticism that he has. I really like him just getting out of the pocket and making moves. He didn't really do that this game, only 4 carries for 3 yards. It's not like he's some like speed demon going to be out here just like working, but he can definitely evade some rushers and make a move or two. And we definitely saw that last week against Chicago on Thursday Night Football. He's going to be going up against the Giants here in Week 7, and I don't really care what happened on Sunday Night Football with the Bills Giants. That looked kind of like a fluky type game, and we've seen the Giants pretty much get torn up in most of these games. Even team like Arizona Cardinals tore up the Giants defense early in that one before the Giants were able to come back. I am going to like Sam Howell here in Week 7 against the Giants, and I don't hate him starting for any 12, even 10-12 team league. If you're a little desperate at quarterback, that's probably who I'm going to be going with just for reference. So definitely be looking at Sam Howell as a play. Some of the other quarterbacks here like Bryce Young, Desmond Ridder. I absolutely would never go with Desmond Ridder. Can't really go with Bryce Young yet until he shows us a little bit more, although I appreciate what I saw from him there against Miami in a pretty big spot on the road. Then we got Zach Wilson is pretty much the last guy. Josh Dobbs, who I kind of want to stay away from unless he's just going to be taking off and using his legs a lot, which we just don't know his situation. Actually, who does Josh Dobbs play in Week 7? He plays against Seattle. He might be the only other quarterback that I'm looking at just because he's more of a vet. He's a little bit older than a guy like Bryce Young, Zach Wilson. Just seen more snaps. As far as flex players go, just talking about some of the guys that were, performing. Rashid Shaheed popped off for a game. He's a guy that I've been talking about pretty much all season. Is just like a very speedy guy with a lot of talent. He's more of like a here and there type body. And this game here, he only went 2 receptions for 85 yards and a touchdown. Only 2 receptions is not good, but he actually does carry the ball a decent amount here for the Saints. He got 2 carries as well. He's like their jet sweep guy. He only has 5 carries on the season, but they'll definitely be looking to get him involved in any way possible. Just get him into space and let him use that speed. He's an electric wideout, and especially if defenses are just looking to take away a guy like Chris Olave or a guy like Michael Thomas, then Rashid Shaheed is a very good option for Derek Carr and the guys. But he wouldn't be the guy that I would be necessarily targeting because his volume is not that high. I think the guy right now that I like the most on the waiver wire right now is going to be Michael Mayer. And I think you guys need to get on the Michael Mayer train sooner rather than later, because I think that he has just been kind of working on chemistry with the offense. He hasn't been getting a ton of snaps. And then Week 5, we saw him against the Green Bay Packers in a primetime game. I can't remember exactly which primetime game that was, but he caught a couple balls, 2 catches for 39 yards. Then this week came back, got more snaps and more targets, 5 receptions for 75 yards. This is a big bruising tight end. He looks like one of the guys that I played in Madden with. I'm trying to think of what his name is. In Madden 25, one of those really old tight end. Who's the old tight end that used to play for the Raiders, actually? He looks just like that guy. I can't think of his name, but big, strong tight end. He's a rookie, I think, out of Wisconsin or something like that. Very big, very physical. He looks like one of the bigger guys on the field, and he has speed too, quietly. Speed out of the route, able to get some separation. So I would definitely be looking to target Michael Mayer if your tight end situation is thin right now. Definitely like him more than I like even Jonnu Smith or a guy like that is increasing his role and his stock is rising. I think I'll even put Michael Mayer ahead of him for his youth and his talent, and just the fact that he's getting involved in this offense now. Seems like they're actually wanting to target him at the moment. Who else have we got here? If Christian McCaffrey is out this week, which is possible with the ribs oblique, Jordan Mason has looked pretty explosive out of that 49ers backfield. 49ers have a pretty good offensive line that can definitely hold up, and Jordan Mason had a pretty good week there in Week 5, so I wouldn't hate looking at him to possibly be getting some work. See if there's any. I don't think there's really any running backs we can be targeting at the moment other than Jordan Mason. Maybe a Keontae Ingram. Kind of surprising. We saw Amari DeMarcado at the top of the waiver wire last week, and hoping that he was going to be able to get some work. He didn't really get any good touches, and Keontae Ingram actually led the backfield in rushes for this game. He had 10 rushes for 40 yards there, and he actually had a neck injury coming into the game, so that was a bit weird to see. The waiver wire currently has Sabon Ahmed as the top running back, who may get some work, but I think he only got 6 carries here in Week 6. Obviously, Jeff Wilson's going to be coming back at some point, and Raheem Mostert is doing major work right now, jumping over people and scoring a ton of touchdowns, being like a top 5 running back. So I don't love grabbing him either. Not really any notable running backs to grab right now until there's a big injury, and I'll definitely keep you guys updated on that. We'll be talking waiver wire claims probably up until tomorrow, so I'll update you guys if there's anybody I'm really, really liking. But let's check some projections. As far as the projections go, nothing too serious. David Njoku is actually popping up as the number 2 person on my waiver wire right now at a projected 8.8 points. What did he do this week? David Njoku. a very mediocre day, 5.4 fantasy points, nothing special. And he actually just got his face burned in some accident. So I'll stay away from any crazy injuries. Off the field type stuff is never too good as it pertains to fantasy football. But that's kind of who I'm liking right now. I would also think that Quentin Johnston has a chance at some point to do some work in this offense. His most targeted game right now, he's at 3 targets, 2, 3, 2, and then 2 this game with 0 receptions. Somehow he did record a fantasy point, which is really weird. I don't know how that happened, but I think that they'll have to lean on him soon. He's definitely more talented and gifted than a guy like Joshua Palmer, but obviously Joshua Palmer just knows the offense way more, and his coaches trust him way more. If his snap count starts to get up there, I would look at him. There's actually a good amount of tight ends that we could be looking at here on the waiver wire. A guy like Irv Smith Jr., very talented. Going to be the tight end 1 there for Joe Burrow, and the